Hello, Amber. Hello, everyone. We are going to have a conversation today about sovereignty and women and resources, and maybe get into a little about business and finance. And I'm excited to be here with you, Amber.
Yeah, me too. I'm thrilled that we're getting into this topic because I'm not seeing near enough people talking about it.
Yeah, I know. Ever since I met you, which may have been about 6 months or so ago now, I was like, okay, Amber, into the future, I see us doing something together. And so this is like step
It's
one.
finally manifesting and coming to fruition.
Yeah, right. Well, and we've been in community with one another. We've been in the Sacred Remembering community and journeyed together in the topic of women's resource empowerment this fall and winter. And so, we're getting to know each other, but this is the first time we're like both coming out. So
Right.
what do you say we introduce ourselves a little bit and then maybe go into some of the story around our sovereignty journeys?
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. I'll let you go first.
Oh, you want me to go first? I wanted you to go first. Okay, sounds good. My name is Sarah Poet, and I have been on a sovereignty journey, but didn't always call it that for, at least 5 years. 5 years ago, I left the traditional career. I had really built up a career in education and administration. And I leapt and I just was like, we're going to do this female entrepreneur thing. I think it's worth saying for what we're going to talk about later that I started an LLC. I followed all of the rules, I established all of my paperwork, the separate banking, filed all the taxes exactly as, they say, and looked for like the best option according to what I knew the options were, when I started my then business. Really walked such a journey of discovery in those 5 years. And so my work is about reclaiming feminine and masculine in consciousness, and then also the energetics of that. So if we're talking about sovereignty, and this is, stuff that I discovered along the way, right? Because my entrepreneurial journey was also my spiritual journey, like hand in hand in hand. And the realization that as we become more energetically sovereign, it is the reunification of feminine and masculine on all levels of our lives. It is about becoming physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually sovereign, and even multidimensionally sovereign. So in my path with some ancestral healing and realizing things about my soul path, I really had to do sovereignty work to get energetically free on the multidimensional levels, so that I could have my prosperity in the physical, so that I could be free, things that were really, really intense to live through, quite honestly. And ups and downs in the physical, like on this journey of really becoming truly sovereign and energetically sovereign. And to me, that means like my resources and my energy are my own, and they are in the oneness of God. Like, it is in that mission that I serve. I always said, I serve the Christos Sophia, like I serve Mother, Father, God. That's why I know that I'm here. The rest I'll figure out along the way, but like, that's my North Star, let it all organize accordingly. And along that path, there was, ups and downs, financial ups and downs, interference multidimensionally, interference in the physical, as a primarily single woman over that path, although the relationships did come to teach me also, the housing for my son and I was something that was really, dare I say, like interfered with, in this journey of like becoming a sovereign and rather radical woman. So my work has been to serve people on this journey and to serve women standing in the truth of who they are. The Sacred Remembering podcast was in existence for over 3 years. We have the Sacred Remembering community And my mission is to serve people on this journey of resource sovereignty, energetic sovereignty, body sovereignty, you know, all of it. And then become really prosperous in that sovereignty. Like, you know, resources in tandem with like the reunification of feminine, masculine, you know, new earth consciousness, new earth utilization of resources. It's kind of what I'm into. That's my jam, is imagining that reality and then walking toward it. So that was a little bit of a longer version, but maybe planted some seeds for things later in the conversation. So yeah, how about you?
Yeah, so I've been on my own journey and I'm still on my journey. A little bit about my, coming to this point. I I feel like I've kind of like lived 9 lives already in terms of the
Yes.
random things that I've done. Like I
Yeah.
grew up with 2 entrepreneurial parents with their own businesses. And then kind of moving away from that for a while, feeling like um a little bit of the chaos that comes with, working for yourself and wanting a little bit more stability, and then realizing with stability comes a lot of politics and baloney, we'll just put it that way,
Yeah.
that I wanted nothing to do with, especially with higher education and academia, which I thought I loved, like the higher, um, philosophical thinkers, like, yeah, that's my jam. And then realizing it's just kind of an auto tune, like an autoplay or something, like just repeating these same things and not really actually open to discussion. And then transitioning when I had my son to working for myself. And at that point, I, in a similar way, but a little different, got into network marketing, and I'm a passionate person for that, as well as affiliate marketing, and really doing things in a way that, where you're not having to reinvent the wheel and still sharing something you're passionate about, because, that's how we find out our favorite restaurant, our new recipe, favorite hair care product, like anything is through word of mouth. And I've just felt this shift coming back to this personal relationship with those we exchange with.
Mhm.
Um, and so kind of the long story short of the detour to where I'm at now, um, I had a series of unfortunate events in my life. I'll touch on those a little bit more in a bit, but that really redirected where I was going and the different life experiences that I'd have had up to that point. And I kind of had this sit down moment with God where I'm just like, all right, I need to know the purpose of all this. I feel like I'm just in survival mode still. I'm exhausted. I'm done with this. I need to know where this is going. And then there was just like this spark of this new vision of where I was going, and transitioning from really this lower, I'm going to say it like lower level functioning in business, to really fulfilling our purpose and being in ministry and service to others. And what that really meant, because I had a lot of preconceived notions and thoughts about what serving and ministry was, and coming to this new like awakening and realization that it's not what we thought it was, to put it
Yeah.
very simply.
Mhm.
um And for me too, in what you were saying, this whole sovereignty thing and being self-governing, it's so powerful when you start to realize the options we were told that we have, taught that we have, is actually really small in comparison to the full scope of options. And I have worked with so many people, women in particular, but a lot of men too, who have just had this like deep feeling of like, there's got to be something better. This can't be the only option. Um, it shouldn't have to work like this. And as I start to help teach what I've learned, they've been like, oh my gosh, is it really this simple? Like, this is what I've been praying for. This is what I've been like wanting to explore and discover. And so part of my, I guess my main purpose is to help others discover and fulfill their God-given purpose or their higher purpose by living with freedom. And really that living with freedom is what sovereignty is for me, is being able to do things in a way that are in alignment with where you're going without having to be told, no, you can't do it that way, or, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think we're both so on the same page that your divine purpose, the reason that you're on the planet, whether or not you know what that is or call that purpose, sometimes I call that your inner truth, right?
Yeah.
It's like the things that are erupting in us or like awakening in us or bubbling up in us, like there's got to be something more, or I really believe this to be true. And then we follow that. That's this process of like continual awakening. And when we live in the alignment of the truth of who we are and we are sovereign, you and I are saying that's where we are also able to be prosperous. And yes, and so much of your work and my work is like serving that. We're both on the journey. We all have further to go because the world is like still changing and still advancing, right? And we believe that that's the direction that we're going, and we stand for that. Like who you really are and what you really know to be true is the exact area where your life can be prosperous and abundant and regenerative. And like, really, not to get too much into it, but the big hoax was that you couldn't be sovereign and you had to follow all these other rules, in order to be okay, in order to like have what you needed, be
Yeah.
resourced.
Yeah. And part of that lie is really being told that, or taught that we have to rely on someone else, or, this entity for permission,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the biggest thing for me is like that whole life, liberty, pursuit of happiness doesn't come with a permission slip. You have that, you own that. And we shouldn't have to get this permission slip to say we're allowed to do this. No, we're born with that right. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I could go in so many different directions because this lights me up so much, but tell us what you do now. Like, how do you live your purpose and serve people's freedom? It's really exciting. That's why I want you to name it.
Okay. Yeah, so I am a PMA advisor. What PMA stands for is Private Member Association. And there's a couple different types, but really what it comes down to is our right to privately associate and assemble with one another and be able to exchange with one another in that protection of the private. And really short synopsis of where that comes from is, we're again born with this inherent right. And yet after the civil rights movement, there was this big push to remove this knowledge and really like force us into this public realm so much that we're really involuntarily opted into always being public. And I think that also, ties into just our teachings on ourselves, and how we should always be open and transparent and obey authority. And I'm not saying those things are bad in proportion. And really being able to opt out of that and step back into ourselves and having this protection around us in what we do, and that I don't always have to share with someone that I'm not comfortable with what I'm doing, because I'm meant to serve certain people and I'm not meant to serve everybody. And I feel like we're all like that. That's why 7 people could be in the same niche and be serving different people, because we're all unique individuals with different interests, with different ways of communicating and resonating with each other. And there shouldn't be like this cookie cutter box that we have to fit in to do that.
Yeah, like we all have our own unique medicine, our own unique magic. And when we step into owning that magic, if you're operating in the public, it's almost like this voluntary disclosure, this like, yeah, here's what I'm doing. And to me, on this entrepreneurial journey, it was almost like my wake up call, which is, I met you shortly after that, was like, if this is my divine purpose and my unique medicine, why am I voluntarily opting in to public domain strategies that control and tell me what to do with my resources,
Yep.
when my magic is my magic, and who I'm serving, that's a private interaction and a private agreement.
Mhm.
And, and it's not really anybody else's business.
Yeah. As a
Yeah.
really prime example, I work with a lot of parents who, want to be focusing and educating their kids in a certain way to make sure that they're really getting prepared for the world that they're living in and being in alignment with their truth and understanding what that even is, and being creative thinkers and, philosophers and, really focusing on their skills and how they function. And these parents also have other passions and interests, whether it's like a hobby farm or being a healer or all these different kinds of things. And these things are so integrated. And that's how we were, designed, is to be these integrated beings with all these different parts to us, not that we're supposed to compartmentalize them as separate. Because as a mom, I both want to, care for my child and, his friends and his friends' families. And it becomes this like unified focus in life, instead of like, oh, over here I'm a mom, over here I do my work, over here I'm a friend. And
Yeah.
they like don't integrate. And that's where I feel like we get so much of this burnout, is we're having
Yeah.
to literally be asked to be different people in these different circumstances when
Yeah.
we're one person.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, yes, there are so many similarities that I feel like I'm discovering some even as we talk, because, I've been saying this for years, like, women, we don't have to separate out aspects of ourselves to go to work, to be the mom, to be the spiritual person,
Yeah.
and to be the person who gets to like make a living in that holism,
Mm-hmm. Love
like
that.
be
Love that.
very, very resourced in that holism. Yeah. Do you want to talk about like internal and external resources for a minute? Because I geek out on that a little bit. Like,
Yeah,
women's resources as we kind of name and relate to them.
sure. What would you
Yeah.
like to talk about with them?
I've been looking at this framework for a while. And for me, like, when I started to ask myself, well, what are my greatest resources? Actually, there was this, I'll tell a little tiny story. Like, when I sold my house on this journey, I sold my house actually as a point of freedom. Like, I sold my house. And the good friend that I worked with, her and her partner as a team to sell my house, and they wrote me a card and they said, very, just in well intention, they said, "Thanks for trusting us with your greatest resource." And that was really a turning like moment for me, because I was like, that house was not my greatest resource. Maybe it was my greatest financial asset at this time, but I am my greatest resource. And so I started looking at like, well, what are my inherent resources? What I give my attention to, what I give my, like spiritual attention to, what I give my heart to, my energy, my life force, my physicality, how I take care of my body. As a woman, my sex, like who, if I'm sleeping with someone, like that's a huge amount of energy and resources that we would be allocating. And all of that, like this system, when I started looking at taking care of my resources, it really enhanced what I gave my energy to, what I did not, my discernment, like you were saying earlier, like that discernment. I don't have to give my energy to this, and this as a matter of automation. Like I get to decide. I get to decide where I allocate these very precious resources. And in doing so, there's a amplification of the return in the external, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's how you and I met, because, well, tying two stories together here, I had done a podcast on the Sacred Remembering podcast, can't remember the number. with Natalie Rose Martin from Asheville, and she's really involved in the sovereignty movement here. And she was talking about PMAs. And I was like, everything I do could be in a PMA. Like, why am I operating, as an LLC? And started to research and watched a couple of YouTube videos on you, I think, found you. You were the only one I reached out to. And you were like, oh, I think I've heard of you, Sarah Poet. And, maybe we should like trade a little bit and work together. And so, we ended up doing Structure and Flow together, which is like my program, so to speak, to look at those internal resources. So that to tell the people at home watching that, like, we've journeyed now in that process together of really looking at the value of our internal resources. So yeah.
And to kind of add on to that, anyone who has been, I'm sharing this from experience and from I guess personal experience and from what I've witnessed. Anyone who's been through something traumatic and they're on a journey of healing from that tend to see what we're talking about in terms of these inner resources. Because when we're healing from trauma, we do kind of have to like tune inward, and especially when it feels like everything else has been taken away from us. Being able to tune inward and be like, okay, I'm starting at ground zero. What do I need first to function? It's sort of like, it's almost like this rebirthing process of, becoming really who we're meant to be. And I'm going to add here, one of my mentors has kind of bestowed upon me this word of wisdom that the things we go through aren't about us. They're things that we can learn from to then help others. And when I realized that through the trauma situation I dealt with, and actually the few things that were very traumatic for me, it helped me stay grounded and focused. Okay, what can I learn from this to be able to then share with others? Is this part of the purpose that I had, and I don't like to say had to go through, because I don't feel like we have to go through anything, but that we can use the things that even feel negative for good, for our good and for other people's good. And so being able to start at that ground zero and be like, okay, first, what do I need? And what have I been through? And honoring that experience, to then be like, oh, these are things that I've learned. And then it just grows. And there comes a point where it feels like a person can like no longer contain this and has to share it with others. And that's like the moment we go from being, in this poverty mindset of lacking to this prosperity mindset of serving.
Yes.
And it's this transition. Yeah.
I was just about to say, when you said serving, like that's the same point in time where you're like, I'm living a mission. I'm not living a business. I'm not living a side hustle. I'm not living, I'm not living to use my energy to make money, to buy things, in an enslavement loop. I'm not here for that. I'm here to live a mission.
Yeah. And when that shift happens, it really becomes like the money is only a tool and a resource. It's no longer about, the money itself. It's what that money can do. So it's like create this cyclical, regenerative. I love that word. Very fitting. This regenerative thing that keeps growing and, I guess just growing.
Yeah. When we think that we're separate from our source, when we think that we're separate from our prosperity, or that we have to be, in an enslavement realm and just participate, we're just, it's like we're always living with like two options that aren't, awesome or full or holistic. And then
go with this one that sucks, or this one that sucks even more.
Yeah. And it's
like that.
It's like through that portal that you're talking about, like that's the awakening. It's brutal, like I have been doing less, I would say, the last like 18 months, because I was in another portal and something just happened that I am like, this is unfortunate, but it's also very fortunate, because I was immediately able now to be like, this is happening for my sovereignty. How is that true? And just like moving forward. And then, the regenerative energetics, which is probably another conversation, is like in that holism and in that sovereignty. And this is what we're experimenting with in the sacred remembering circle, because when women start to do things collaboratively, like not enmeshed, like you've got your work, I've got my work, but we have no problem being like, check out my awesome sister who's doing awesome work, because we all rise together, so to speak, and we know that there's enough to go around, and we know that we need to complement one another and all of that. But then we take it to another level and we start to involve actual, dollars and actual, like, in the same space, in the sacred remembering space. I'm starting to, well, I'd say it's been going on for a while, but I'm just like putting it into action more. It's like, you can earn money right alongside me earning money, and like sharing a space for feminine regenerative prosperity and energy, and like trusting that everyone's resources are going to amplify. It's like, if someone's stepping into that space, my mission is that her resources amplify. I'm going to figure out all the hows, or,
Right.
Spirit's going to give them to me. Like they're going to be unlocked, right, in this new paradigm. But
it really goes back, and I think is it a Zig Ziglar quote that like we get what we want by helping others get what they want? And it's not from the selfish or greedy standpoint. It's really about like seeing things more as like this blessing that when we feel secure enough, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I'm going to use it for now, in ourselves and what we have to offer, and just trusting that we will be taken care of through sharing what we are meant to share. And it's that trust and that like faith in the divine that takes it away from this like manipulative, selfish thing that we want to get away from. It just feels cringy,
right.
And most people don't like being in that system, but they don't know anything else. And so moving over into this, it just feels so freeing, and just you can release all of that clutch onto really the fear-based mindset. Really the fear and the poverty-based mindset. It's just a huge release.
Because the actual energetics of sovereignty and the actual energetics of regenerativity, you have to get away from fear. And that's the crux. Like I live it in my own life. I'm like, oh, I'm in fear again, like, oh, that's the either or frequency. That's I call it the bi-wave frequency. That does not replenish. Fear does not lead to replenishment. So how am I sovereign, and how am I aligned to God? To me, they're one and the same. And, when you and I say God, again, that's another conversation for listeners. Define it for yourself. We're talking about like pure unity, pure oneness. I think we'll begin to wrap up because we both have like meetings at the top of the hour kind of thing. But I want to ask you a question about language where sovereignty is concerned, because I think that this is really important. And recently I was at a local meeting that I went to, and I'm really grateful. Like Asheville's got great things going on. It was a free meeting about the topic of sovereignty and political sovereignty. And I was really happy to see at the meeting that there was this opening of a conversation between the spiritual sovereignty and the political sovereignty. And again, without going into it, I see the energetics of spiritual sovereignty in the unified field, in the oneness, in what is not separation, right? And I don't know how we can have sovereignty politically or financially, without that. So I was glad to see that starting to arise in the conversation. But what I heard so much was the use of the word they. Like, they are doing this to us. They are making these rules. They are forcing this. And I actually took myself out of the meeting early because I was like, it doesn't feel sovereign to me. And I didn't make a big deal about it. I just, I didn't even say anything about it. But and like blaming doesn't feel like a sovereign thing to me. It feels like a victim thing to me. Like, yeah. And I know that you're so much about sovereign language. So yeah, I just wonder if you'd like to say anything about that, or about the language part of, choosing sovereignty from our speech.
Yeah, there's quite a bit I could say. Two
I
things.
bet.
I'm gonna try to focus on these two. So based on the thing that you just said about using they and this like blaming victim state, yes, when we start shifting into sovereignty and self-governance, there is this big shift to taking personal responsibility and ownership of things. There's so I like to say that if knowledge is power and we don't have knowledge, we have no power. And when we know better, we can do better. This is the moment. We are opening the door
Mhm.
to knowing better. And if we choose to not walk through that door, that is willfully choosing to remain in this victim state.
Mm, mm.
If we do choose to
Default.
walk through that door of gaining knowledge, there is this humility that must come with it. This humility of, and we can, yes, we can acknowledge that we were taught
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z. And now that we realize X, Y, Z is either not true or not the full truth, now we can come back into that ownership like, okay, I need to unlearn this and shift and accept that this was not what I needed to know. And now take this ownership of relearning actual truth with a capital T.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself, that shift is huge, and it is very layered, kind of like onions and ogres. It-
Mhm.
there's this cyclical nature, even with healing, that sometimes we have to revisit things once we've healed enough to uncover like the deeper layers. And when it comes to unlearning and relearning, it's also very cyclical and layered. As we start to come back around and learning a certain truth and like, okay, so what does this mean? Now we start to dig a little deeper and dig a little deeper. And that's where sometimes people talk about going down the rabbit hole.
Mhm.
Now some rabbit holes I don't always believe we need to or should go down, but again, that's where discernment then comes in.
Sovereignty, sovereign choice.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
And the other thing I want to talk about in terms of language, especially in this conversation, talking about like business and finance and all of that, is as we start to shift into being more purpose led and being on a mission, getting out of that commerce language. And I will say it is a challenge. I'm still playing and discovering and exploring what that looks like for myself, because
Mhm.
instead of saying work, I'm focusing on service or even like labor if it is, you know, more, I would say, strenuous. Um, Instead of talking about sales, talking about
Mhm.
exchanges.
Mhm.
Not that these are like set in firm concrete language shifts. We each have to find what works best for us and recognize that this commerce in and of itself really lends itself to this poverty mindset and
Mm.
this lacking mindset. And so if we can shift out of that, there's a lot of, I don't want to say freedom because that sounds so cliche, but there is a lot of openness and
Mm.
um just expansion in
Yeah.
getting out of that commerce language.
It feels like a fun exploration. Like that's how my system is responding to hearing you say that. I'm like, yes, moving from like payment to donation,
Yes. Yeah.
is like, it's a required donation or it's a voluntary donation, but it's a donation toward the ministry that I'm running, toward the ministry of, I almost said my work, of my, my, what is a gift. Like if I'm standing in the full truth of who I am and giving that, it is a gift and I can receive for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And make a
And
living for that. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
and even especially with what we do, you know, a lot of it can be perceived on a very like super basic level as like coaching. What
Mhm.
about guiding? What about
Mm.
mentoring?
Yeah.
These other terms actually feel more juicy, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
They're just, there's so much more to them by being a mentor and a guide and being,
Yeah.
just like we're coming along you or alongside people
Yeah.
rather
Mhm.
than having like this top down thing. And that's like huge on my heart is, as we grow, then we bring others with us. And it's not like us talking down to people who might not have, healed a certain thing that we've already healed. It's okay, I know what that feels like. I'm going to come back here for a minute where they're at and let's come up together.
Yeah.
And that's another part of this that's not work. It's service and it's mission and it's ministry. That's what those things look and feel like. And it's so different than,
Yeah.
the corporate structure that we've, all been
Yeah.
used to. And once we make that shift, there's like no turning back. Absolutely.
Yeah. There isn't any turning back. And yeah, I'm recognizing an example. So we have every other Sunday calls in the Sacred Remembering community, which is a ministry. And this past Sunday, I shared something. Another woman who's been, we've been walking side by side for a couple of years now, said, Sarah, I just love how like there's not this pedestal, like you're just, real, kind of told a really raw, really real story, and it was like, I'm, humble enough to be like, I'm not positioning myself above anybody at this point. It's like, let's help each other. And then, another woman this was her first call. She was so inspired by this like new kind of way of, and she's like, I have so much to learn from everyone. And I just got chills. And like that's this new community, this new regenerative model. That I'm here for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I could talk to you for
I know.
days and days and weeks, but let's point people to where to find us because, and I'm thinking the best thing may just be to go to our websites, make sure you're on our email lists because there's going to be lots more information about developments, and we'll share it to that place probably first. So Amber, do you want to shout out your
Yeah. In
website?
fact, I'm gonna open the link here. It's a little bit long. So my website is go.livingwithfreedom.org/PMA. So I'll repeat that again. Go, like go, livingwithfreedom.org/PMA. And I can share this link with Sarah too. So wherever this gets posted on her end, she can, put it in like the caption
The
and wherever
notes. Yeah.
the notes,
Mhm, mhm.
and I'll share it too. What this is a really basic website just to give a little introduction on what I'm doing right now. I am expanding to having like a full service website, but right now, like this is just where I'm being led to focus because so many people need what this is.
And
Which
it's like helping people develop PMAs.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
Mhm.
So I help them find the right PMA for their needs and I draft documents to get it, set up and structured, and provide more resources and things like that. So what this is, it'll give you access to a little introduction, on what PMAs really even are, why they're important, and then eventually it'll get you to like where we can have a consult. And I do
Yeah.
free consults because I realize like on this journey, it feels like everything costs money. And yes,
Mhm.
we're like the full service thing that I offer, and I need to shift that language even.
Mm,
um, there is a cost, donation for my time, but I want to at least introduce you to what this is before you have to like make a choice.
yeah.
Because, this information is not openly out there in a lot of places. So I
Mhm.
want to make sure that everyone gets, free access to, understanding what this even is.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And just a informal testimonial that like when I signed up for your email list, I received videos. They were educational. I mean, I know that that education is such a part of your mission. And
Yeah.
so thank you.
And they're
And
short,
yeah,
like a
yeah,
10-minute video and the full
yeah,
webinar is 25 minutes. It's not
yeah,
like hours upon hours, this whole thing. It's
right.
you can do
Yeah.
it in an hour.
It's a starting point. And anybody who's on this journey prepared to do hours and hours and hours of, research and like
Yep.
one step at a time,
Right.
one step at a time. Like to be transparent, I I had all this information. Amber helped me to get the ministry documents like needed to operate in the private domain. So the legal documents, we have, and I was kind of moving things over and feeling a little rushed and pressured to do that. And then I was like, not from you, from me. And then I was like, okay, spaciousness, self-love, I'm going to take 2023 and kind of let it be my like transition year, let things settle into place. I still had kind of loose ends from other like, tax years and things like that. And so it was like, okay, just breathe, like create spaciousness and and allow for the new energetic like realignment, which I was just thinking about that this morning during my yoga. I'm like, okay, it's, we're going into summer solstice. It's like halfway through the year. I'm like, okay, energetic realignment, now we're going to turn the corner in the second half of the year and really move toward these new energetics. So part of what's happening on my end is taking this community to the next level, or allowing the energetics to take us to the next level. And the Sacred Remembering community, I'm hosting it on Mighty Networks, but it can be found through sarahpoet.com. And I do energy support, I do relational support. I really want to start doing more organizational support. So putting that out there that, gosh, there's just so much separation. I really see my mission as helping to heal separation. And, we can all live in sovereignty and all be in right relationships with each other. It's not like sovereignty means isolation. It's actually the opposite. We're like getting sovereign so that we can relate better. So I really love helping in that regard. And just hop on my email list, sarahpoet.com, and I'll link that as well. So yes, and we're both in the Sacred Remembering community. I know that you are other places as well, and that you are going to be potentially creating lots more educational resources. So just stay connected with Amber, be on her email list, and come find us if we can help and support you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amber, thanks so much for this conversation. Hopefully it's the first of many. And I appreciate being on this path with you.
Yeah,
Grateful.
same here. I'm so
Yeah.
thankful that our paths cross because, that mutual exchange, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing when we're just, both open to exploring. Um, and that really is what community is all about, is exploring what each person, can offer that we can benefit from and equally exchange then.
Yes. Yes. Like each person has a unique magic. And
Yeah.
when we're standing in that unique magic, like we are a thread in the tapestry and everyone is meant to work together. It's
Love
like
that visual. Exactly.
no mistakes. Yeah. So pleasure. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you.